we'd go up on the roof every night and fly kites, keep my neighbors all up. We'd go into all the office buildings and steal their plastic plants and stuff. I mean, cause we were partying, and we'd come party in the Mission, and then we'd walk like south of Market or whatever, rage the whole way back, and then just raise hell on Market Street and Tenderloin all those years.
That was Brett Cline, owner of the Lost Church San Francisco. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco, a podcast all about the artists, activists, and small businesses that make this city so special. In this episode, we'll meet and get to know Brett, whose live performing arts space in North Beach is a very special San Francisco place for me. From his roots in Southern California and his college days in Santa Barbara, to his move here in the early 90s, we'll see many of the foundational qualities that go into the Lost Church. Here's Brett.
So I always like to say I'm from the deep south, Southern California.
Yeah.
Deep behind
Northern Mexico.
Yeah, Northern Mexico, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Deep behind the Orange Curtain, Orange County. Yeah. Back in the 80s, that was the Republican stronghold of California.
Yeah.
At that point. And I always like to say, my mom hates this part about it, but I always say, I call Orange County like a cultural void, except for surfing.
Skateboarding.
Yep, skateboarding, punk rock, and Taco Bell. And
those are all four wonderful things.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. As long as you're comfortable, like limiting your cultural experience to those four things, it's a great place to grow up.
Well, I'm thinking about 13 to 18-year-old me in suburban Fort Worth, Texas. Those were I never surfed, but like those were four things, and we were like not idolized, but we looked to, I don't know if Orange County specifically, but we were just like fucking California.
Oh yeah, Southern
California was like Oz.
Yeah, totally.
It was amazing.
I forget. So I graduated in '89 from high school. How much
92.
older? 92. So yeah, but roughly like the '80s Southern California punk rock was deep and sick, and not necessarily just like Orange County was kind of the tip of it. Moving more up into Costa Mesa, South LA. I mean, that's where like Black Flag, and I didn't know about a lot of the, and I actually really loved, like the bands I loved were like Suicidal Tendencies, their first album blew my mind. Mm-hmm. Social Distortion, again, the first album. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite moments was when I was 16, coming home a little buzzed at 2 a.m. and turning on PBS, and up was this movie called Another State of Mind.
Oh yeah.
It's so good, but it follows Mike Ness of Social Distortion. They're all like 18 years old, and I think Youth Brigade was the other band that, that went on tour with them, and they get a school bus and they go around the U.S. And visit all the punk rock places. And back then, that was when they were all underage, so they were playing. The local kids were renting out VFW halls and stuff, and putting on these punk rock shows.
And they were $5 if they were two.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, dude, they were cheap. It's one of the great documentaries, and I really got into punk rock in like. So the deep backstory is in second grade. No, probably closer to fourth grade. I always get these off by a few years. But basically, I'm the oldest of 4 children. Next door was the Baltz boys, who had 4 boys. The youngest boy, Matt Baltz, was a year older than me and became my mentor, protege. The oldest boy, Jeff Baltz, was probably 18 or something when I'm 5.
Okay.
So I basically had 4 older brothers.
Right.
And one day I go over to Matt Baltz's house, and we go into the second youngest brother, Andy Baltz, who will say he was like 7th or 8th grade. But again, they're already getting culture passed down to them from the
oldest brother. Yeah.
Whereas I was like just in my own little bubble, except for the Baltz boys. And we went into Andy's room. I think we snuck into it. And there was an album there. And it's the Cat album, which was Oingo Boingo's first EP.
Wow.
Right? And I looked at that album cover, and I was just like, what the fuck is this? I honestly think it was my first experience to like any sort of alternative thinking. Like just the artwork itself was so mind-blowing to me.
I'm going to do a little bit of math. This is like 80, 81, 82.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I got to go back and look at because I recently looked up. In my brain, it was always second grade. But I think probably fourth grade.
Yeah.
So I started
super early 80s.
Yeah. So, and then we listened to it, and I was like, oh my God, you don't hear this shit on the rate, Like, no. I mean, maybe we heard Rush or something at that point was like as edgy as it got on.
It would have taken like a special DJ on a mainstream.
Yeah.
And they were probably dotted around the country at that point, if they were, or like college radio.
Yeah, and I don't.
But it was harder to.
It was harder to find.
Or if you had like a kick-ass record store.
Well, so this is the next part. Basically. So I'm going to speed through this stuff because we might never get to actually the SF years because the brain wanders. But,
all good.
Yeah. But so I took Oingo Boingo and they became the defining point of my personality.
Okay.
Right? Because nobody else at school knew about them.
Okay.
So I drew the dancing skeleton on all my albums and Oingo Boingo, I kind of define myself as I'm the guy who loves Oingo Boingo.
Okay.
They're my special band.
Yep. Love it.
So as we cruise along, and there's a slight crossover here, but around 7th, 8th grade, it's hard to say, but the crossover was simultaneously I met Jeff Clark when I went to junior high school. And he turned me on to this record store, which kills me. I knew the name forever, but it was a punk rock record store. It was like a 10 to 15 minute skate across town. Yes. And we would go there and just look at all the album covers, And you'd pick, because you couldn't hear any of these records, you just pick the band by the logo, and you'd look on the back and be like, they look pretty cool. And you'd read that.
What about magazines?
Not yet. Once I got at that record store, because I'm saying again 7th grade, so what is that, 13?
84.
Yeah, 13, 14, something like that. Yeah, 84, that's about right. Yeah.
Okay.
84, 85, and 83, 84, and there was this record store was run by a guy who had his own punk, and I'm guessing he was maybe 22 or something, and he seemed like he was like old as hell.
At the time, right, there are elders.
Yeah, he was the elder. And he took us under his wing. But you'd look at the back of the albums, and you'd be like, and if they had a keyboard player, no way. Done.
Okay.
That was a hard no-no. Mm-hmm. Even though I think Oingo Boingo did. But simultaneously, so as I'm getting into all these crazy records, and, maybe you'd spend $7.99 or something, and I'd have just enough money to buy one album, so you'd be there for like an hour or two deciding which album you were going to get. Mm-hmm. We'd go back to Jeff Clark's and listen to it and just be like, oh my God, this is so amazing.
You said you skated.
Yeah, we skated.
So of those 4 things you mentioned earlier, the cultural pillars of Southern California, you got the punk rock and the skating. Did you surf and eat at Taco Bell as well?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. I was a Taco Bell food.
Just making sure you're a good citizen of this part of the world.
Yeah. Well, and in Southern California, the big split was it Del Taco or Taco Bell?
Oh.
And
has that been settled?
I've gone more Del Taco in my later years.
Okay.
I've definitely, they're harder to find up here.
Do you miss the one on Market there?
Yes, I missed that one a lot.
It saved me a couple times for sure.
I love that Del Taco.
Yeah. All right. So, just a quick sidetrack. But, this record store.
Yep. So the record store.
So now you're buying records.
Yeah, buying records, loving records. And simultaneously, roughly in the same time, again, was Oingo Boingo came out with Dead Man's Party.
Okay.
And suddenly everybody loved Oingo Boingo. And that was honestly kind of my first heartbreak, where I felt like they'd abandoned me.
It wasn't yours anymore.
No. We no longer had our special relationship. We were no longer mutually exclusive. Yeah. It was like this open relationship. So then I said, forget Oingo Boingo. And I was just all punk rock after that. And so...
When did you start playing? And what did you start playing? And
my
what's that
first
story?
band was, again, I always say younger, but I think it was probably 6th grade. In 4th grade, you were allowed to play a string instrument. 5th grade, you were allowed to play a woodwind. 6th grade, you were finally allowed to play drums.
Oh.
Yeah. So I did violin. 5th grade, I did saxophone and then she's like, but... in 6th grade, you'll be able to be a drummer. Because all the boys wanted to be a drummer, right?
Yeah.
So I get to 6th grade, And I'm like, I get to play drums now. And she's like, oh, but you're such a good saxophonist. And I didn't have the balls to stand up for myself. And I remember like walking home that day just like so brokenhearted. Yeah. Meanwhile, though, my buddy Mark Kiley got to be a drummer. Oh. So he had a snare drum. So we started this band, High Voltage. And it was basically the album. I was lead singer, so I wrote the lyrics. I drew the album covers, and Mark Kiley made beats on the snare. So we were like a hardcore stripped-down band, snare and vocals. Oh, shit. That was it. Okay. Yeah. I kind of love it. It was awesome. Do you have any of that? No. Okay. No, I don't think so. But it was basically a chain link fence. So there was the Surf Punks album back then was a chain link fence that was like locals only or, something like that. Yeah. So ours was going to be Danger, High Voltage. It was sick. So that was the beginning of it all. And you don't have like lyrics written down or anything? No, I don't remember. I'm sure it was very deep and intellectual because I was so far ahead of my time. And cocky, or at least confident. Yeah, all the above. Yeah. So that's kind of the roots of the whole thing. Definitely got super into surfing in 6th grade as well. And it was kind of like, so I nailed all the pillars. And I think earlier you were talking about parents, and I've been thinking a lot about this in terms of how the Lost Church evolved, how it's literally a perfect synthesis of my parents. Oh. On one hand, there's my mom, who was the community organizer, save our schools, just huge, activist. Huge activist. Okay, in the public school world, she was a huge activist. In Orange County? In Orange County. Okay, love it. Yeah. There was one thing, CASE, Citizens Action to Save Education. Mm-hmm. And this is in the 80s. And my mom was Christian, but there was all the hardcore right-wing book burners coming up then. Yep. And so she was like a Christian fighting Christians, like... For public schools. Yeah, for public schools. Interesting. And so she had this group called Citizens Action to Save Education. And I remember at one point seeing her on TV in the Rose Bowl talking to like 5,000 people or whatever. Oh shit. Yeah. And she was the school board president, and she was definitely involved in local politics, all about public school. But from an activist angle, not like an elected. Well, the school board is elected. She was on the school board. Did you just say that? And yeah. She actually was the president of the school board. Like, Bobby Cline was hardcore. Bobby Cline, thank you. I was going to ask her name. Yeah. Bobby Cline. Loved her. BBI. Bobbee. E-E? Yeah, she's a Roberta who became a Bobby. My grandma must have got her that one. And then on the other side of the parental thing, my dad came up through military first. They both met at UCLA. And then he went to kind of another weird side story. My mom actually followed my dad around through Vietnam while he was a Navy pilot. So he was on the aircraft carrier going. And which one? One of them was the USS Kitty Hawk, which recently was decommissioned maybe like 3 or 4 years. Is it in San Diego now? Yeah. I think it got decommissioned like 15 years ago, and now it got moved in as a museum. The reason I asked, my dad was on the Midway. He was up in the bridge. Wow. He wasn't a pilot, but Yeah. But what was your mom doing following him around? Oh, just like they just gotten married. Yeah. So she just kind of like, and the wives would go around and follow. I never heard of this. Yeah, and they'd go port to port or whatever. And a lot of times it was like after you do your tour through Vietnam, I think they'd go cruise through Greece or whatever, and so they'd kind of follow them. Yeah. But yeah, she was like 20-something, like. Going around to Asian countries in the middle of a war. I never heard of the wives going. Yeah, they did. And that's the other side story of that one is one of my favorites. And for my 50th birthday, we actually went back to Greece because I was conceived in Greece on one of these things, right? Yes! Yeah. The punchline of that story was that, so the next morning, my dad has to leave at 5 a.m. to get back to the aircraft carrier. Meanwhile, his best friend, my Uncle Buzzy, who was like a Green Beret, he'd come and met them the night before or something. He comes in the next morning to pick up my mom at like 8, and they're going to go out to breakfast or something, and he'd drop them off. And so the next morning, my dad's gone. Uncle Buzzy's comes and gets my mom. They turn to go out the hotel door, and the elevator opens, and out walks my mom with this strange guy at 9 a.m, and it's all the captain's wives and everything are just there. And then 9 months later, I was born. So kind of the joke was I kind of do look a little more like Uncle Buzzy than my dad.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
He had a Porsche, so he was cool. Yeah, and so kind of circling back, the two halves of the equation, mom, like community organizer, very active in the community and trying to make the world a better place, as did my dad, but he was on the corporate side of things.
Okay. Back from military service.
Yeah, back from military service. He goes on to UCI. I was actually, some of my earliest memories are in the student housing at UCI. And after UCI was when they moved to Mission Viejo. And basically the split of, I was thinking the other day of how the Lost Church is really like, or I am this culmination of a perfect blend of my mom, who's this cultural or community activist, spaces, like bringing people together and these kind of things in the school system side of things. And then my dad running businesses. And he came up through like the mid-range corporate world, like not a big, huge corporation, but I'm sure they're all like few $1 million a year corporations. Yeah. And it was all on the aviation side of things.
Okay, that tracks with what you've told me.
Yeah. He was an engineer as well. Okay. So, but it's interesting how quickly he got out of it and always would start his own companies. Oh, so he's an entrepreneur. I mean, that's really what he was. And, so I got to see him go through all these different things, and I'm fascinated by it because honestly, the thing I love about the Lost Church, so starting out in the beginning, the Lost Church, I did everything. I mean, my wife and I did. Lizzie and I co-founded the Lost Church. Lizzie would work the bar. I'd book the shows and then run every show. And now currently, all I do is run a business and constantly figure out how to run a better business to keep us alive. I'm very rarely involved in doing nightly shows. I don't do any of the booking or anything. Okay. My whole creativity goes into like business models and how are we adapting our business model to survive? So that's where I see myself as like, wow, that really kind of like landed right between the two fruits of the trees or whatever, like this cross of like, because that is my favorite in a sense. I mean, my favorite thing for the Lost Church is always like building and designing theaters. That shows. Yeah. Oh God, I love building theaters. I mean, it's just after you've done one thing, like, well, I always say 5 years, but again, let's say 3 to 4 years, where like 4 to 5 nights a week, I was running every show. Right. Totally burnt out on that. Yeah. Like you just would dread them. All day, like, oh, God, I got to work the show again tonight. But then the show would happen, and it's the happiest place on earth. Right. Right. Like, I mean, that's why you kept doing it. I kept doing it. But
that's in a sense that's like performing, like the anxiety and dread, and then the show starts and everything's a fucking blast.
Do you play in a band?
I did.
What do you play?
Bass guitar.
Kind of going back to I having my first band in 6th grade, and my only dream was to be a touring punk rock musician. Yeah. I never wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to be a blue collar, like my idols. I wanted to get in the bus or the van and but like you said, coordinating 4 people to get their shit together. And when you're young, like I had bands all through high school. I don't even know if we ever played in front of anybody.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Just like, practicing.
Always in garages, like, and then just right when you get ready to do something, like kind of never really figuring out how to push through to that next level,
So never playing shows, never recording?
That we did recording. Oh, God, I can't remember the name of the band anymore. But
that's all right. Were you still just singing or were you playing anything?
Oh, at a certain point, I realized I needed to play bass.
Oh, bass guitar.
Well, like I needed to add something to the band because
that's one less member.
Yeah, one less member. One less member to deal with, Like at least I don't got to deal with that guy. Yeah. And so I was playing bass and singing, and of course all great people, but it's just especially when you're younger and keeping personalities and like it takes a really strong, driven and to not just put a band together, but at that level to organize shows.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I think in college was the first bands that really started playing out. That was Saint Rusticus. That was I loved that band. And now, of course, everybody's got a saint in their name. But back then, we were the first saints.
Right. So this is like late 80s.
Yeah, this is.
So you graduated 89.
Yeah, I went to UCSB.
That's what I was going to ask.
In 89. 89, 90. I graduated in 89. So, so it's one of those first things. So 89, 90. I'm in UCSB up in Santa Barbara.
So you were punk rock, but not too punk to go to college.
Oh, hell no, definitely not. Yeah.
Were you always kind of like into school, or what was your relationship with school?
Man, I think I always dealt with this issue of being a goody-goody. I always got great grades up through 6th grade. I was always president of the class, all that kind of stuff, you know.
Leader type stuff.
Yeah, though it was just, I always wonder, like, how much of it was just the popularity contest of it, sort of a thing.
Yep.
I can't really put my finger on why I wanted to do that, but I was also always on a stage from a very early age too. Like back then, every class had to do a play, like 2nd grade, you know, like every class. At De Portola, my elementary school, we always had a different play, and my mom was always the piano player, so I was in chorus. We always were going to a local theater around, you know, and up to LA to go see local theater. My mom's heavily involved in, like, loves theater.
So there was always performing arts.
Always. My dad plays organ. Yeah. Like, we had an organ at the house. My mom was always playing piano.
Amazing.
Yeah.
What about your siblings?
They all played. My sister, not so much my brother. So I'm the oldest of 4. My second brother, Gavin, he played clarinet, I think, through high school, but nobody really went as hard arts as I did, except for my sister Paige, who went to NYU and was an actress and a vocal and a singer. She did musical theater. She was really good.
Okay.
And she ended up kind of coming back to Orange County and leaving New York, kind of be closer to my folks and family. And she ended up taking a path away from that. Even when she came back to Orange County, she was doing a lot of plays, but she ended up, now she's a therapist. But yeah, I'm the only one who was heavily like, I was sure that was my thing.
Right.
You know, and so it was never able to get a touring band. Like, even then, like in college, junior high school, always had bands. They never played out. College, we started actually playing out because we were at UCSB. We lived in Isla Vista, which is like, I always consider it, if anybody is old enough to have seen Pinocchio, the original movie, where they all turn into jackasses, like the island of, that is freaking Isla Vista.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Like, it's like, I think it's the densest packed place west of the Mississippi. But I recently heard actually North Beach is.
Or Chinatown?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, one of those.
When we were actually arguing, when the local community, certain people were trying to not let a Lot's Church go into North Beach, which was crazy.
Yeah.
One of the people who came online to argue for us was like, we live in the densest packed place west of, like, you know, Greenwich Village or wherever the hell it was.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, one more little 99-seat theater is not going to be a blip on parking or anything.
Right.
But up until then, I was always told Isla Vista was the densest packed place. And that place, it's just college kids. Every house is college kids.
Wow.
Everyone's just walking around skating. It's right on the beach. Every night, free keg parties, and they always had bands.
Right.
So we were playing all the time, but we definitely, St. Rusticus had the record for getting shut down the fastest.
Yes.
Like 3 songs in, the cops were always there.
A badge of honor.
Yeah, it was.
Right? Yeah,
it was.
Yeah.
We took it as a badge of honor for sure. And so,
did y'all tour?
No, we couldn't get that much together. I don't even think we didn't have money for gas.
Yeah.
Like, we couldn't even go downtown Santa Barbara half the time, like, you know. Right. So, no, we were
if you
just
got all the
local
instruments and members of the band to a show.
Yeah, well, that was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
That was pretty amazing. Good times. And there was a lot. And also when I went to Santa Barbara, that's when I actually got introduced to Northern California as a whole.
Okay.
Yeah, and had no idea that, for instance, Northern California hates Southern California. No idea. But you go to UCSB and they pair a Northern California kid with a Southern California kid in the dorms.
On purpose?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. They were bridging the gap.
Yeah.
But that was when I first learned it. Because in Southern California, you're kind of like, San Francisco, is that in Oregon? you know? So eventually I did get a touring band with my wife, but when we were touring around, we learned that Memphis hates Nashville.
Yeah. So there's all these like...
Yeah. And Nashville has no idea.
It's like almost like a sibling rivalry, but one sibling doesn't even know the other one.
Yeah, totally. It's like, what? I'm president of the class, and the other one's like in the dungeon. But
I've never heard that about UCSB, that they do that in the dorms intentionally.
Yeah, it's what happened. I mean, it was interesting. But I ended up becoming friends with all the Northern California kids.
Had you visited? Let's just say the Bay Area.
Yes.
Before this time. Okay.
I remember in like 6th grade, we went and stayed in Union Square.
What were your first impressions?
Well, it was Thanksgiving, so it was empty.
Oh.
I remember it was cold. It was one of the first cities I was able, like, I'd get up in the morning and get to go around, walking around Union Square at like 7, 8 in the morning by myself. So it was kind of one of my, like, because I'd never been to LA really, and again, this is 6th grade or something, so that was kind of my, and I won't say that I instantly fell in love with it by any means. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just kind of like, oh, whoa, what
did it feel different though from where you're from?
Oh, way different.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's one of the things that, like, going back to Orange County, the thing that I was more hungry for almost than anything was culture on so many different levels, but especially architecture. Mm-hmm, you know, where you're living in the suburbs. I always said, when I was describing to people, and it might be like where you grew up, which I always say we grew up in like E.T. Village.
Yeah.
You know, like where it's like,
for me, minus the hills.
Bikes. Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We strip malls and
every 7 houses is the same. You know, there's pools, 7 models. Yeah. Pool, you know.
Okay, so Union Square was cold and empty, so you were ready for the post-pandemic.
Yeah,
San Francisco.
Totally. Yeah, and I definitely remember like the cable cars, and we went to Alcatraz, and yeah, it was just kind of a trip.
Yeah.
You know, the weather was so different from Southern California. Yep. Just everything was just kind of different back then.
So then fast forward to now when you're in college, did you come up?
Yes. So that's when I started falling in love with San Francisco.
Let's hear that.
Yeah. So in college, I started, the big right turn was, so punk rock, senior year, senior year, I think senior year, I had mushrooms for the first time and had acid for the first time. My friends, I was also working at Irvine Meadows. My first job was working at Irvine Meadows. So I got to see like the Grateful Dead and stuff. And when the Grateful Dead came through, I was like, what is this shit? Right? It was, but the people were like trading the acid for beers. I don't know how I was selling beers. I'm still confused about that, like as a 16-year-old, but there I was. I also have the record, I got to say, at the time, making 1,200 hamburgers in a night because you'd run them through the machine, you know?
Yeah.
And so that was one of my other jobs at Irvine Meadows.
Okay.
Yeah, but so now I kind of started branching out, and I got into more mainstream music, but older mainstream. So a quick journey through the 60s and 70s. The Doors, who I loved intensely and then intensely hated. Mm-hmm. You know, Pink Floyd, who still lasts to this day. You know, I appreciate them. I can't think of the last time I listened to them. But so I started getting through that. Then I got to college at UCSB, and there was this band, Electric Blue, who they were local heroes. They were the top of the, but that was my first. I mean, there was no such thing as anybody called a jam band,
right?
But they're effectively they did Allman Brothers, they did the Grateful Dead, and suddenly standing on a cliff, dancing on acid. I fell in love with the Grateful Dead.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I went to over in a couple year period 110 shows or something like we'd tour around and sell nitrous and grilled cheese and stuff. Yes. Though I quickly got out of the sales stuff because I hated how it took away from going to the show. I was really about going to the show and dancing. Yeah. Like that's what I like, drums and space in the middle of, like that's what was my whole thing. Fuck yeah. So we were coming up to Northern California a lot then. And, Shoreline. And then when Bill Graham died, one of my favorite shows was the free show in Golden Gate Park. And it had, like, John Fogerty being backed by the Grateful Dead. Wow. It was, and on the other end of things, growing up, we didn't have a lot of, like some people have parents who I got all my, they introduced me to all these rad bands. Mm-hmm. Me, I still love Neil Diamond, but it was a lot of Neil Diamond, Barbra Streisand. One of the things my dad, the 2 albums I loved that they had was Sgt. Pepper's, and I'm not a huge Beatles fan.
Me neither, but that record's
for sure
solid. Did something to me.
Yeah, that record's solid, and just from the album cover again and everything. Always into album covers. But my dad did introduce me to Creedence Clearwater Revival, which is still,
El Cerrito.
Yeah, dude, they're amazing. Like, the kid was like 18 to 21, and they had like a 4-year career, and they cranked out like 12 number 2 songs. I don't think they ever had a number 1. Right. Just amazing. But John Fogerty, his voice, the rhythm, and again, cross-referencing, like, so to me, the 2 great guitar players, I loved Tom Fogerty of Creedence Clearwater, like I loved the rhythm guitar player brothers, and then AC/DC, Malcolm Young.
Yep.
Everybody loves Angus, but I was like, Malcolm.
Yeah.
I mean...
Did you live here already?
No. This was all coming up from Santa Barbara store. Okay. You still,
Let's fast forward just a little bit for time. But like, what was it that got you to move here?
So when I left UCSB, the original plan was to move to San Francisco with my buddy Davey Lyle, who I had actually met years ago in Carlsbad, Southern California, but we actually became really good friends at UCSB.
Okay.
He's the one whose the paintings are all in the Lost Church. These amazing black and white paintings, Yeah. He's a fantastic artist. But so he and I were going to move up here, but my senior year, I got a D in my art class, and my dad was like, "Son, it's time to fish or cut bait." And simultaneously, I found out that all my Spanish classes from Mission Viejo weren't going to be approved. So I was going to have to stick around another year.
This is the stuff of nightmares
for
me.
I was going to have to stick around another year, and I barely made it through UCSB. Okay. I was no longer, by high school, I was no longer I was more of a B plus minus kid.
Yeah.
And back then, with a decent SAT score, I got into UCSB.
Yeah, right.
But UCSB is not what it is today, which I guess you need like a 4.8 and like.
Oh shit.
Yeah, it's crazy. All UCs, it's insane. But so at that point, my parents were so amazing. I'd actually gotten into at the end of UCSB. I took a loan from my parents, which has been a recurring theme through my life. Thanks, Mom and Dad. You're the best. Yeah. And they helped me get a computer, a printer, and printers weren't. No, a computer, a scanner, and a monitor, and the first version of Photoshop. Oh. Which was 1.0. It had just come out on PC, which is why I've been PC ever since. And for basically, Macs were really expensive back then.
Yes.
For the same price, I could get the scanner, the Photoshop, and a computer and monitor as I could just get for like the Mac.
Okay. And what was the purpose of all these?
To do album covers. Yeah. So I did all the album covers. I did Electric Blues album cover, Evil Farmer, I was doing all the album covers my senior year of the local bands, And when I dropped out of school with like 6 units left or whatever, it was brutal. My dad hooked me up with an internship in London. So I moved from UCSB to London, interning with this graphic arts company that was actually part of a management firm for Queen. And so I got to see tons of crazy shows in London as well. A lot of it, they were a big management company, so I'm trying to remember. I think Bush was one of the, we went to the industry party, and we were all sitting in the back like, God, these guys suck. Because everybody was so post Nirvana at that point. The reference point was this is Nirvana with blah blah blah. This is Nirvana with Yep. And but I was there about just shy of a year, I think, and I kind of knew it wasn't for me. I almost felt like it was interesting. I felt like I'd lost all my superpowers when I was there, and I don't know if it's magnets in the earth or Well,
you were a little more anonymous, right? You didn't have your people.
Yeah, my peeps, and being a long hair surfer guy, which was a big deal in Santa Barbara. I was never some swinging ladies man, but I had my share of popularity. I was not an unpopular kid.
Right.
And I had great friends. I'm still friends. Actually, from that, the Lost Church logo is designed by the lead designer, my good buddy Nick Cordell, who was like the rock star punk rocker who would but he was the design, he was the talent. So he would roll in late on his motorcycle at 10 and just like do they'd trot him out for whatever band or whatever. But so I'm still really good friends with a lot of those guys. But as far as like deeper stuff, I just kind of knew as soon as I was there, like, I was like, this isn't where I'm meant to be long term.
Right.
And so I came back, moved to San Francisco, moved in with Davey.
Did y'all come up here without jobs and without a place to live?
Oh, hell yeah.
Because you could.
You had to. I mean, what?
Yeah.
How would you even get a job? There's no internet. Or, I mean, I think there was email maybe if you were with NASA, like no, of course you came up here with no job, and I moved
and no place to live.
None.
Did you like couch surf?
I moved in with Davey, so he had a warehouse.
He was
space.
already here.
Yeah.
Okay.
He couch surfed on another friend who also is deeply involved still with the Lost Church.
Okay.
But so,
warehouse where?
South Mission. No, we were at between 19th and 20th on Florida Street.
Okay, yeah.
So like Harrison. And that was crazy back then because it was just, when you'd walk around, you're like, oh man, am I going to get killed by a gangster?
Yeah, it was
just desolate.
Right.
And gangsters didn't kill white kids. They never have.
Right. Right.
And, and
Sureños Norteños. I used to live at 20th and Mission. So
totally. It's a dangerous place if you're a Sureño or a Norteño, but as a white kid,
red and blue.
I mean, even from then. And so then I moved to 6th and Market and lived on it was one of the first old office buildings that they started converting into lofts. So it was all offices below us. And then we were on the 6th floor on Market Street between 6th and 7th.
Okay.
And
near the luggage store?
Yes.
Yeah.
We and we'd go up on the roof every night and fly kites, keep my neighbors all up. We'd go into all the office buildings and steal their plastic plants and stuff. I mean, we were partying.
Right.
And we'd come party in the Mission, and then we'd walk like south of Market or whatever, rage the whole way back, and then just raise hell on Market Street and Tenderloin all those years.
What year? What year did you move here?
So I moved here December 28th of 1993.
Okay.
Right. So college was 90, 91, 92, 90. 89, 90. So I left Santa Barbara at the end of 92, 93, early 93, and then say 9 months in London, and then by December of 93, I'm here.
All right.
And so just having a blast. And it's also so my first introduction to homeless people, so in Santa Barbara, homeless people there are more kind of like, one, there was no tents, and there's like 5 of them. And they were just kind of like the local ragers who hung out longer. And they were your friend. There was Leprechaun. You'd get him a beer at the kegger. Like, it was a very different thing. But I remember going to London as a young kid and going to, what do they have there? The Tube, I think. Mm-hmm. And going with my parents and seeing my first real, like, mentally ill homeless person. Mm-hmm. Because I'd never seen that ever.
Right.
Like, you were just like, oh, and it was really, honestly, it was scary as a little 6th grade kid back then.
Right.
And never really had much. And then when we were going into LA, you'd see homeless people. But I'll never forget moving into 6th and Market, Stevenson Alley. I've always wanted to name a band Stevenson Alley. Yeah. But so we're coming in the back door, we're loading in, we come out. There's a gentleman sitting there smoking crack and taking a shit simultaneously on the doorstep.
Talent.
Yeah, it was. It's serious talent.
Damn.
And I remember my friend's dad being like, oh, sorry. And even at that age, I was like, you don't say sorry. You say, what the fuck are you doing, man? Not here, Like,
at least one at a time.
Yeah, not on the doorstep. But so that was kind of the first intro to all the wackiness of San Francisco.
Okay.
But I loved it.
That was Brett Cline from the Lost Church, San Francisco. Check back for part 2 and the actual origin story of the Lost Church. That drops next Tuesday, wherever you get podcasts. Music for Storied San Francisco was produced, performed, and curated by Otis McDonald. Aaron Lim of Bitch Talk Podcast is our contributing producer. And the show is produced and hosted by me, Jeff Hunt. Now in our 6th season, we have more than 200 episodes available on our website, storiedsf.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're able to, please rate and review the show, and drop us a line at storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Keep rejecting those silly doom loop narratives about our city. Stay wacky, weird, healthy, and creative. And we'll see you next time on Storied San Francisco. We acknowledge and respect the first humans of the unceded land we call San Francisco, the Ramaytush Ohlone. We condemn the genocide of these and other tribes across the Western Hemisphere. We honor their legacy and history, and we support rematriation and sovereignty efforts.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcasts.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.